experiment is about 3D body models, which is a relatively new way of representing and tracking the human body. But first, as a quick background, I've been tracking my weight for a few years, and more recently I've been tracking other people's weight and physical variations through a company that I co-founded, Fitnescity. And so when you think about weight, as we all know, it's basically a number that gives you one specific perspective on your body. For example, these people and I have the same weight and height, but the one on the left has higher health risks because of body shape. It's also not that easy to differentiate between good and bad weight. So, for example, when my weight increases, I always try to convince myself that I gain muscle, even if it's not true, because it's a bit hard to get an accurate measurement of body fat versus lean mass anyway, at least not in your home on a daily basis. And so about a year ago, I heard someone say that in the future, everyone will probably have a digital body model as part of their digital identity. And they would use that to buy clothes online or even track their health and fitness. And I found that quite intriguing, actually, because by scanning something, which is how you would get that model, you basically get a dimensionally accurate replica of that object. So it's a little bit like your accurate virtual self that you're seeing and tracking. And so I was curious about what I would learn from it, from a physiological perspective, obviously, but also maybe from a psychological, behavioral one. And so what I did is I used a 3D body scanner, which is basically a machine that uses multiple cameras to capture information. And once the data is processed, it can be visualized as a 3D image. And so I did this multiple times over a period of 1 year. And during that time, I continued to track everything else that I was tracking. And so my first scan was in July of last year. And it wasn't actually here in this location, but it was in a different one where I wasn't given the scan data, but just the end user access to the model. And so, and the result was something like this. And I thought, you know, it's cool, it's okay. But I also thought that there's probably a little bit more that could be done with this scan data. And so, starting from here, August of last year, I built my own tool with the help of a small team, which means that I was also able to add my body model to the same platform where I have all my data, which is nice. And so, at this point, I only had one scan, so I wasn't able to compare anything yet. But what I did first is I started to play a little bit with this scan and measurement data. So one of the first things I did in order to build a target body model. So kind of like you would set a target weight goal. So this is like sort of like a future self. The second thing I did is actually use the body model as an interactive visualization platform for other tracking data. Because I found that for some data, it's much easier to view it directly on the body. For example, if you track body fat locally, you can just visualize the value interactively on the body. And then the coloring code can show you easily, for example, whether the change was positive or negative. So mostly visualization benefit. And so at this point, I finally got my second scan, so I was able to compare. So first thing I did is compare the models visually, obviously, but also compare them mathematically. So compare them by matching the scan data and actually computing the change, positive or negative, locally by body part. And so as a result, what you see here, for example, the delta is shown in green when there's weight loss or when the volume decreases, and in orange when the opposite happens. And the result is sort of like a heat map that shows you how the body is changing with, you know, coloring code that indicates the type of change and its magnitude as well. And the way this is done is actually by measuring the volume of the body, the volume in liters, locally in each small body part. And so this actually led me to another second stage in my exploration where I started to use the body model as a source of data itself, which wasn't initially my intention. So, for example, I extracted body volume, for instance. I had no idea what my volume was in liters as a human being. So it turns out this was the trend. And then what I did at this point is I also compared it out of curiosity with my weight. as you will see soon, in kilograms. And interestingly, they didn't follow the same trend. And that has to do with our density, so human density being weight divided by the volume. So our density as humans changes over time because our body composition changes. And so, for example, here, my density increased, which means that my body fat actually decreased a little bit. And so connecting this with what I was saying at the very beginning, so body fat calculations from a bioimpedance scale, which is what I use on a daily basis, have an 8 to 10% uncertainty. As opposed to here, it's 1 to 2% if you extract it from body volume, which means that it's kind of harder to argue that you gain muscle if you didn't, right? So another thing I did also with this is, last thing is posture analysis. So I found out it was actually useful for analyzing posture. So I found out, for instance, that I had a small misalignment, which is probably why I was getting frequent injuries with exercise. And so what did I learn from this experience in summary? I did find that the body model was a good tracking and a good visualization tool in different ways, as I explained. But for me, actually, there was another hidden and kind of surprising element, which is that I found that probably the most compelling use case or the most compelling thing is more on the psychological behavioral front. So the way I like to explain it is, think of it that you're tracking your weight number or any other number that you kind of care about to a certain extent. And every time before measuring or looking at that number, you get that feeling of, what am I going to get? So this is a little bit the same, except that it's very much amplified, probably because it's not just a number that you're seeing, but maybe yourself. So, so in terms of next steps, actually, I decided to extend this experiment to a larger number of people to understand this specific dimension. So I wanted to understand, for example, whether visualizing your future self and your progress towards that, whether that's something that could have some sort of impact on your behavior when it comes to diet and exercise. So I'm doing it right now with Fitnescity. We had about 100 people on the list, and we're just actually opening it up to a larger number of people. So if you're interested in the results, or if you're in New York sometime and would like to try it out as well, let me know. My email is laila@fitnesscity.com. So if you have any comments, ideas, or suggestions, I'd love to read it as well. And I'll be here for office hours as well. Thank you.